he asked me, like, would you be willing to talk to the FBI? And I said, yeah, sure. Like, I don't got nothing to hide. These guys wanted to escape. They felt like they had no one else to turn to. They asked me to help. I wasn't asked to do anything illegal. I didn't hurt anybody. Before we left, I said, like, is everything good? And the FBI guys were like, yeah. And then 2 weeks later, I get a phone call from the agent saying, like, hey, North Korea has discovered your identity, and we have confirmed reports that they are going to try to assassinate you. Every single time I've ever done this operation or helping doing defections or whatever, nobody knows my name. The only people that know my identity is you. So I'll just kind of start from, like, I guess, you know, you're interviewing me, so I guess I'll just kind of start from my beginning.
I think that's a good place to do it.
Yeah. So, you know, if I have to look back and kind of pinpoint a moment where it kind of, this whole thing of where I am kind of started, I think it would have to be when I was 17 years old. So when I was 17, this was, you know, I grew up here in Los Angeles. And my father was in the Air Force after he came to the United States as an immigrant. He graduated from Los Angeles High School, and he joined the military. And after the military, he got a job and all this kind of stuff and got married. And after a while, he started his own business in Los Angeles and, you know, had kids. And, you know, I was the firstborn and whatnot. And things were going pretty hunky-dory. And then the 1992 LA riots occurred. And it decimated our business, along with, you know, hundreds of other Korean immigrant business owners, as well as, you know, other people here in Los Angeles as well. But the largest brunt of the LA riots was felt, the destruction was felt by Korean Americans. And my dad needed to come up with, what is he going to do, right? Like, he's got a family to feed. And he started his own, you know, we didn't have the language back then, but he started a startup. You know, and he did what all startups do. They cash out what they got, and you know, he sold our home, and he put all of his money into this new business. You know, and you know, it started to a couple years into it. It was starting to build a little momentum, and I was in high school, and I would help out on the weekends and during the summer and whatnot. I would go to his office and help out. And this was a pants company, a slacks company. And I would answer phones and do the thing, you know, just being a kid. And when I was 17, my father was diagnosed with cancer, and 4 days later he passed away. So it was more like,
wow.
It was more
So
like
fast.
an accident, like a car accident, than it was like a long drawn out, making sure your affairs are in order and whatnot. So he went from being around the house to gone. And at the time, we had no money, because all of the money was invested in this startup that my father started. And my mother didn't speak English very well. You know, we lived with my grandmother. I have a younger brother. And the last thing my dad told me was, you know, you got to be the man of the house now. And so that's kind of where all of this started. We were in a situation where our family was desperate. You know, we didn't know what to do. My mom and my family were looking at me to provide them guidance. And I'm just a 17-year-old kid. I hang out with stoners and skaters and, you know, doing my thing in high school. But, you know, now I've got to take care of my family. And I remember, like, even today, I can distinctly remember feeling the desperation and feeling lost and scared, not knowing what to do, and knowing that if I made the wrong move, our family would be out on the streets. Like, my grandmother would be out on the streets. And, you know, long story short, it worked out, right? Like, I was able to, you know, pretend that, like, my dad was gone for a while, pick up the phone and be like, hey, you know, you remember me? Like, I helped out my dad on the weekend. You know, like, my dad told me that he really wanted me to make sure that you were taken care of, but I'm just a dumb kid and I don't remember what I was supposed to help you with. Can you remind me, you know, what I was supposed to do for you? And so through, you know, just kind of figuring it out, I was able to get by and bring the merchandise and then give it out and ship it out all over the country and send it to our salesmen and on the warehouses and our customers and all that. But I got through by the skin of my teeth, and I knew that, right? Like, I was mature enough to know that I was totally immature to be dealing with this, right? And so I needed to figure out, how am I going to continue doing this when I already know that I'm completely ill-equipped to do this? And so a friend of mine, like, who was a stoner and skater kind of guy, and I was in high school, like, he was older than me, and after he graduated the year after, and I was a senior in high school, and he showed up, and like, this dude, like, he left as kind of the sloppy guy, and he shows up with, like, the dress uniform, looking super sharp, and I was like, how did you become this guy, right? Like, what is the transformation that occurred? And he was saying the Marines did this to me. Like, it straightened me up, and I realized that, like I said, that's it. That's what I need to do. That's the quickest route that I can go from where I am today as like this dumb kid to being a man. To be able to have the confidence and the courage to be able to take on the responsibility of taking care of my family. And so I enlisted in the Marine Corps Reserves. And, like, when I went to boot camp, I'm still leading the business, right? And so after I graduated, I went to boot camp. And, like, when guys were getting letters from their parents and their girlfriends and stuff, I would get, like, fabric swatches sent to me, and inventory lists, and my drill instructor, they open up all your mail, and they're like, what the hell?
Your parents are weird, man. They keep sending you pants samples.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're in the Marines, but you're still running the business?
Yeah, so I would write, like, letters to my mom, because she would send me documents that were sent from our suppliers or whatever it is.
Right.
And I would read it, and I would write the response to it, and I would send it back to, mail it back to my mom, and then we had her secretary type it up, and then they would fax it to our suppliers and stuff.
Wow.
Back in the day when faxes were the thing. So, like, I'm in the Marine Corps, I'm running a business. My mom is saying, like, I may have failed you financially, but I'm not going to fail you as a mother. You're going to have to go to college, right? So I'm going to college. I'm running this business. I'm in the Marine Corps doing my, once a month kind of thing, trying to kind of juggle all these things. And then 9/11 happens, right? And that throws, the whole world gets thrown into a loop. But specifically for me, it was, all right, well, now I'm in the Marines. Like, you kind of know what's going to happen, coming up. So, we started getting ready to go to war in Afghanistan and stuff. And around that time is where I said, look, I just graduated college. I think this is the right moment for me to kind of, I'm potentially going to go to war, right? I can't be running a war and running a business out there, right? And so we started looking around for a buyer. We were able to sell the business. I bought my mom a house, and I started focusing on going to war.
Wow.
And I actually wasn't on the list of those who were going to be deployed. I had moved from here in California to Texas, and I had gotten word that my old unit was deploying, and we just spent years and years preparing to go, and I knew the guys there, like, they were my brothers, and the idea that they would leave and I'm left behind, and when they come back, that some of the homies never got to come back,
Sure.
that would tear me apart. So I left everything. I came back to the old unit, and I said, hey, I don't care if I'm just going to be filling coffee for people. Like, I got to go. Like, let me go with you guys. And so I went, and that's what I was doing. Like, all the jobs were taken. I'm a forward observer by military training, but when I got to Iraq, my main duty there was to make coffee, and just for the officers there.
Somewhat safer, I think.
Yeah. And I just, I couldn't stomach the fact that I came all this way just to make coffee. And so I would poke my head into all the various little kind of offices and desks that all the officers had. And I say, like, hey, sir, I got a college degree. I can be doing more than just, making coffee, And one thing led to another, and, they put me in the intelligence shop. And by the time I left, I became the deputy chief of intelligence for a battalion out there. And that sounds like a big deal, I think, to the civilian, but I think other Marines will know that, like, that's not that big of a deal. But it is what it is, right? It's like, that's
but
the thing.
That coffee was so good.
Yeah,
I made the best coffee.
Yeah. But, I came back from Iraq, and I had this experience where, I was helping my family out when they were in a very desperate situation. When I was in Iraq, my day-to-day job was to understand what had happened over the course of the last 24 hours and the last week, compile it and provide some context to it and then provide that context to the Marines on the ground as well as the officers. And part of that was interacting with like Iraqi army and others in the area. And you're seeing face to face the desperation that they're facing, right? Like I didn't, I always, whenever I talk about Iraq, like I always try to make it clear that like I didn't choose to go to war or anything, right? Like I'm not trying to defend or go against the positions of what the war was about. But when I was there, I wanted to make sure that I had the most positive impact that I could for my fellow Marines, as well as the people that were there to help, and they were also in a very desperate situation where they're just normal people too. They have kids, they're trying to send their kids to school, they want to have their kids a better life. And it was part of our collective responsibility to make sure that we can try to do our best to make that happen for them,
How did you then go from Marine or the war zone to deciding to get involved with a group like Free José?
Yeah. So it's a perfect segue, because this is kind of when it starts to happen. I came back from Iraq, and I'm happy to be home. I got a job. I'm working at the job, and it's slowly starting to eat away at me, and I'm not really understanding why. And now many years, kind of looking back at it, like I'm very, very, I know exactly what it was, which was when you're in the military, and especially I guess someone like me, where the reason you wake up in the morning and what it is you do after you wake up in the morning are very intertwined, right? Like why you do and what you do in the military is very, very clear. Like you're there because you're serving your country. Or when I was in Iraq, I'm there to help these Iraqis and help the locals. I'm there to help my fellow Marines. But when you get out, you're just earning a paycheck, and it becomes like, why am I doing this? Like, what's the purpose of any of this? And there was this huge hole that I had that I just didn't understand that was there. And there was just this urge and need to be able to do something more than just kind of making a paycheck. And I went and I found a veterans organization that I started working with, and I started working with them and went out to Washington and was working with veterans, and I felt super fulfilled. And then the financial crisis occurred, and all the nonprofits lost all their money, and I'm back to where I started. I've got no job. I need to financially support my family, and I want to make sure that I'm doing something that feels like I'm making, I don't want to make it sound cliche, like I'm making a difference, but it's just clear.
You want a sense of purpose of some kind,
Yeah. I am not a North Korea expert, right? Like I didn't start doing this stuff because, I nerd out about like North Korea things, and I.
You don't have to throw such disdain on nerding out about North Korea things.
No.
Pal.
I mean, and that's fine, right? Like, but that's just not like what motivated me to get involved with this kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Right. So like the things that I say and it's going to be things that I've read myself, and some of the things that I've experienced. But there are so many people, you included, that could be far more knowledgeable about what happens in North Korea. And I was not motivated to help these people because, that I had some kind of dream of the regime, being overturned and all this kind of stuff. If it happened, would I be happy about it? Absolutely, right? But I'm not that guy. I'm just a guy.
So what did motivate you then?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like what motivates any of us to do anything, right? And so, and I can get into it, but like it was simply because when someone is desperate and they're reaching out to you, right? It's not like a hypothetical, what would you do in this situation or whatever. Somebody called me on my phone and said, there are people who will die if you do not help. And you have the unique circumstantial kind of experiences that will help us achieve the fact to help them avoid this fate. I approach this the same way that I do when I volunteer for Habitat for Humanity, or when I help out with the Boys and Girls Club, or when I go volunteer with helping out kids like in Linwood, which are underprivileged kids and stuff. Like the point of service in my life is a very central like part of who I am.
Sure.
And I had to learn that kind of the hard way. as someone who, was in the Marine Corps and went overseas and served and then came back and, you're just kind of at the time, and this is still an issue where the veterans are just kind of like, okay, thanks for doing your time, good luck, and I was kind of out there trying to figure out like what makes me whole, what can I do that makes me a living, and at the same time makes me feel like I'm happy with what I am doing, right? And during this kind of time of where I'm trying to figure it out, I reached out to a mentor that I had. And it's a guy that I met in college who was a pretty prominent Korean-American guy, that was successful and was interested in some of the same things that I was when I was in college. And I reached out to him and I said, hey man, like I'm kind of in this situation where I'm trying to figure out what it is that I want to do. And I'm not really sure where I want to go. What do you think? Like, what do you suggest? And we had some conversations, but one of the things that he had suggested was meeting this guy and having and connecting with this guy that started Link, Liberty in North Korea. It's the most like famous North Korean kind of underground railroad operation that was out there at the time. And the guy who started that was a guy named Adrian Hong.
And they primarily help people, facilitate escapes from North Korea,
Correct.
Or help people who have escaped get to South Korea, et cetera?
Correct. Okay. So like, they have a very big awareness kind of campaigns that they do, but they also do, especially back then, there was a lot of activity of trying to help those who are in sexual slavery and other North Koreans that were in really bad situations be able to escape that. And Link was facilitating that. And Adrian was very, very well known in the Korean American community because of him founding Link and the incredible work that they were doing. But he had recently left that group, and he was out also looking for something to do, and he had contacted my mentor, and so he thought it'd be like, hey, you guys are in kind of similar situations, why don't you guys like hook up and kind of meet each other? And I thought, yeah, sure. So a couple weeks later we met up and had a couple burritos, and we just kind of shared about like, I asked him a lot of questions about like his experiences, and he was asking me about mine. And we just kind of, realized that we were different, we're very different, but we kind of were on a similar wavelength of saying that like, if we want to do something, it's got to be more than just being able to pay the bills, And I'm not uniquely a guy that was focused on North Korea in my life, but as a Korean American growing up in our household, like, the Korean War is my grandmother was fled Seoul when they invaded. My mother was born 5 days after the invasion of Seoul. So like the Korean War and North Korea and the American sacrifice of 50,000 plus lives that lost their lives defending South Korea. These are topics of conversations that we had growing up, right? So even though I'm not some kind of like North Korea guy that like nerds out on this stuff all the time, like it's very, present, in my history, in my life, right? And so the fact that there's this dude that's out there, putting it out there, trying to make a difference, like I respected that, like I didn't think I was going to get involved with that, but I respected that. And so, he told me like he wasn't sure what was going to happen in the future, but we kind of agreed to like, hey, let's stay in touch. If there's some way that I can help you in the future because you think that I'm able to help you in some way, then sure, yeah, give me a call and we'll talk it out, and I'll see what I can do. And that's kind of where we left it, and after a few years, we would kind of check in once a month, or excuse me, once a year, once or twice a year, and we just kind of catch up and saying like, what you've been up to. And, for me, I went to business school, and, I'm just doing like the yuppie thing, right? Like just moving on with my life. And he's out, doing like, he went to Libya and was helping out the government there after the fall of Gaddafi. And he was doing all this incredible, like, experiences. And so I was like, wow, that's fascinating. And we would talk, and, I would ask him like, what's the plan? What are you planning to do? And he would say like, oh, I don't know, but this is kind of what we're doing. And that's kind of what it was for several years. And then I would say that like in the mid 2010s, he reached out to me asking about my opinion and my thoughts on this idea that he had, right? And the idea was that like his experience working in Libya, right, was that when you have a country and that is built with a dictator on the top, what fuels that infrastructure is blood and fear, right? Because you have to have this culture of that if you don't follow what the dictator or what his people say, then there are some very deadly consequences that will occur after. And you need to fuel that to make sure, remind people that's what happens, and those are the real threats, and that's what motivates people to stay in line. When you take away that leader and you drain that infrastructure of what's holding it together, it's very, very fragile. And what we saw in Libya, Iraq, and other places that had their despot eliminated or taken out, that very fragile infrastructure crumbles. And what Adrian told me that he personally witnessed when he was in Libya is that you had these amazing people from overseas that were Libyan, that wanted to create a better future for Libya. And they would come in and they're educated, they have the best intentions, but they don't know what's going on. Mm-hmm. Like they need time to be able to figure out and kind of acclimate, to understand like what are the biggest issues, what do we need to focus on, and there's millions of people outside waiting for someone to tell them what to do, right? And meanwhile, the government is basically stopped because there's no one telling them what to do. So there's all this pressure on like the top guys that came from out of the country to fix everything and bring to them all these things that they were hoping for when the authoritarian was taken out of power. But that takes time, and the country doesn't have time, and the infrastructure crumbles. And when it crumbles, it creates that vacuum, and then nefarious characters come in. And we've seen that happen time and time again. So Adrian came to me with this theory. He said, if we create basically this like encyclopedia where, we're able to create, I can go to someone like who runs a water treatment plant, and I can say, hey, look, man, what's happening in North Korea is bad. And like, do you want to help them? And it's like, well, yeah. Well, what am I going to do? I'm just some random water treatment engineer guy, right? Well, what if I told you that if you can write like a white paper, it doesn't have to be super sophisticated or anything, but like, what are the top 10 things you need to make sure that it's there for this treatment plant to run properly, or to maintain, or if you want to improve it, or to make sure that it can be a proper, well-working, well-functioning water treatment plant. If I asked you to write that, could you write that? And more than likely they would be like, yeah, that's just some basic stuff. Because one day what I'd like to do is gather all these white papers from all these random people. And, if you're a kindergartner teacher, write like a little white paper on what like kids need to have in order to have a solid development in the future.
Are you setting up sort of a parallel infrastructure or a well of expertise, so that if the North Korean regime falls, it's not like, oh crap, what do we do now? It's like, here's everything we need to unplug a country and plug it back in again.
Well, it's really more about it isn't even that formal. And we're not advocating how that occurs or when it's going to occur, but if it does, and we hope that it does, let's try to give whoever takes charge 90 days, 6 months, like a year of just some time, so you can give them shovel-ready jobs that are put together by all these kind of regular, average, everyday folk, because we're not trying to make North Korea and their infrastructure the best in the world. We're not trying to make them like, modern and all this kind of stuff. We're just trying to make sure that the system keeps running while the people who come in to take over have the time and the room to learn, to acclimate, to understand what needs to happen. In the meantime, the people need to be doing something. So if you if you drain the infrastructure of blood and fear, how about we fill it up with jobs and cash and money and give them things? Give the infrastructure, like go work on the roads, go work on the treatment, like water treatment, chemicals, concrete factories, education, in order to give these people the time so that the country can get on their feet. And it was also this crying like this, like, you know, you talk to the average Korean American who knows the way that I do, the way that you know about what's happening there, and you say, do you want to help? More than likely, they're going to say, yes, I would like to help. But trying to help something like North Korea, which is this huge issue, like, what is this? What is random people, like everyday individuals, going to be able to do to help that situation? And the opportunity and the kind of think tank that Adrian had created, called the Chosun Institute, was to collect regular, average, everyday people and say that you have a very specific, special, understanding and skill. Can you write something that we can compile and collect together, and we can give this encyclopedia to whoever may need it in the future?
So how do you go from knowledge base to direct action?
Yes, good question. So, when Adrian asked me that and told me about that, I thought, man, that's a fantastic idea. What a way to activate, people, to make them feel like they can make a difference with what it is that they can do and what it is that they know. So I was like, yeah, man, go do that. I approve. And he said, well, what can you write? And I'm like, I don't know.
How many pants do you need?
Exactly, right? Like, at the time, I was running like an e-commerce consulting kind of a thing. So I'm like, I don't think the North Koreans really need to figure out how the best way to market, online shopping is.
What we need is Shopify.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what we need.
Here, I'll give you a discount code, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not something that I felt that I could easily compel myself to like get in there and do something. And he was like, well, why don't you write something like military oriented? I'm like, I am not the military guy, man. There are a lot of people that know this stuff a lot better than I do. I just did my time, did what I can, serve my country, and that was kind of it. But I said, but I cheer you on, man. And if there's anything that I can do, maybe to help in the future, let me know. And after a while, he would call and to these meetings where he gathered all these people from all around the world. I would see people from Europe, from South America, and they weren't all Korean descent either. They were all there because they thought that this was a fantastic idea of utilizing everyday people to come together and create something that could one day make a difference. Now, when Adrian was going around Europe, like trying to recruit some of these people, if you're a North Korean talking about, like, if Adrian's walking around talking about North Korea to all these random people, the North Koreans are going to find out, right? And they started to approach him and have conversations with him, like, what are you doing?
You mean like North Korean intelligence services?
Yeah. Like, what are you doing? What are you trying to do? And he would have, the conversation what Adrian told me was that he would have these conversations with like these diplomats and these important people, and they were very skeptical of what he was trying to do, and like, are you trying to like overturn the regime and all this kinds of stuff. And he was honestly telling them like, yeah, I mean, it would be great.
No kidding.
It would be great if that occurred, but like, that's not going to happen tomorrow, and I'm not going to be the guy that's going to create this. What I'm trying to do is that when and if that occurs, that you and your family have a chance to have a better life in North Korea. That's kind of what it is that we're trying to do here. And after multiple conversations over years, I think it was, the North Koreans started to create a rapport with Adrian, realizing that he was genuine. He was genuine in what he was trying to do. And
I'm sorry, I just have to clarify. On what level do North Korean officials develop rapport with somebody who's saying, yeah, I'm pretty pro the idea of taking down this regime, and you could have it better?
Well, it wasn't necessarily taking down. I mean, again, like
cheering the downfall of the regime. Yeah,
but
also typically doesn't go over well with those folks.
No. And so the answer is what a great question, right? Like, I have no idea, right? I wasn't there to have these conversations. These are just things that when I would meet up with Adrian and have conversations, like, he would tell me the things.
He would tell you, and it sounds like it sort of, you responded to this.
Yeah,
vision.
I was like, wow, that's crazy, right? That's kind of like what I would say. And so that's kind of the situation of where it was in 2017. He's going around recruiting these people. These North Koreans are skeptical, but he's starting to make connections and he's starting to build rapport where he can. But people are kind of, arm's distance kind of a thing. I think he's probably on their radar and all this kinds of stuff. And that's kind of the situation it was in 2017. And then the Kim Jong-un assassination occurred.
Right.
And that was kind of an inflection point.
So for people who don't know what we're talking about with that, this is the brother of Kim Jong-un, who's leader of North Korea. He's murdered in an airport. I think we've talked about this on the show before. He gets murdered in an airport by two women who rub chemicals on his face. Turns out to be, was it sarin or VX? VX.
Yeah.
And he dies this horrible death that is worthy of a Bond villain, essentially.
Yeah.
It's really crazy. And it once again puts North Korea on the world stage in a typical North Korean way, which is negative, but turned up to 11.
Yeah, and one of the things that we have to remember is that like they chose to assassinate him in this way, in a very public way.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
They could have done it in like some alley and kind of stabbed him a few times, let him bleed out or whatever. Like they didn't decide to do that. They didn't want to do it quietly. They wanted the world to know that
It's on video.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so this is what happens. Right. So that's the kind of country that we're talking about here, right? Whatever it is that they do, when they do this stuff, they wanted to make sure that they're not only doing this for the world stage, but they're doing it for everyone inside North Korea and the diplomats around the world as well.
It's branding and domestic consumption propaganda for the whole country.
Absolutely.
So, okay, so this catapults everything from knowledge base to, well, wait a minute. Does it turn the urgency up?
Yeah, so what happens is, in Adrian's kind of travels around Europe, he meets with Kim Han-sol. Han-sol is the son of Kim Jong-un, right? And so one of the things that, people have to realize is that North Korea is not, I'm kind of saying the obvious here, but North Korea is not a normal country. And the way that they operate is far closer to Game of Thrones than it is kind of a modern day government. And so it's all down through lineage, right? So there's the God leader, Kim Il-sung, and then his son who takes power after that. And then what's supposed to happen after that is his son, his eldest son, is supposed to take over. But the current guy in power right now, Kim Jong-un, is the son of a concubine. So he's the bastard son, right? And because the North Koreans deemed Kim Jong-nam too Western, not reliable, they decide that the better choice is to go with Kim Jong-un. And for Kim Jong-un, that means anyone that's tied to Kim Jong-nam is a threat, right? And so you see him assassinate his brother. You see him assassinate his uncle, who was kind of partial to his brother. And reports are that there are like infighting in North Korea where divisions of military guys were killed because of people trying to vie for power, right? Like, I don't know. I'm not a North Korea guy, so these are just things that I've read as well. But that's kind of the situation, right? Where this guy is trying to make sure that he has his iron grip on power and he's going to eliminate any threat that he has. And so in February, after probably months and months of planning and years of waiting for the right moment, they go out and execute him in a very public way. While that was happening, his son, Kim Han-sol, immediately after, gets a phone call from someone in North Korea saying, hey, I don't know if you know this, but your father's been assassinated and you need to get the hell out of Dodge because they're coming for you as well.
Right, because he's next in line.
Exactly.
Right, he's the eldest son of the other guy in line for the throne. It really is like Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Like, you got this sort of Jon Snow character.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
kind
of a bad guy.
But the complete opposite in
Exactly.
every other way, just in terms of and then it's, so this kid, because Kim Han-sol is a kid, right? And
He's a kid.
Isn't he just in private school in Bosnia or something like that?
Yeah, like he went to school like in Europe somewhere, and he gave some interviews to an international media company talking about how he hopes North Korea becomes a better place and all this. And those are direct contradictions from what North Korea is saying. North Korea is saying we're amazing, right? And he's going around saying like, no, not actually, right? And so he's a threat, and he gets a phone call saying like they're coming for you, and he looks out the window, and he has security with him 24/7, and they're all gone, And so again,
Wait a minute. This kid has security with him 24/7.
well,
and they
his
just
family
vanish?
does, and they vanished.
What?
Yeah. And so try to put yourself in this kid's, kind of situation here, right? Like, I cannot relate with, the Prince of North Korea or whatever it is that you want to call him, but I can relate with a guy who recently lost his father. His family is looking at him to basically lead them to safety. And he doesn't have anyone to turn to. Because this kid looks out the window, his whole security detail is gone. The country where he comes from wants to murder him. What do? Right? Is he supposed to go to the Americans and just be like, hey, can you help me? That I don't even think that would even ever cross his mind, right? Because you are North Korea. That is your mortal enemy. So he picks up the phone and he calls Adrian. And he says, hey, Adrian, like, they murdered my dad and they're coming for me. I don't know what to do. What should I do? And so Adrian starts going like, okay, well, we need to get you out of, where you are, Macau, and to somewhere safe. And then we call around to figure out who we can kind of help to facilitate that. And we'll see, and then I'll let you know. And by then, he had already made all these connections with all these people for the think tank that he created. There were lawyers there. There are government officials there from in Europe. There are random guys that are like kindergartner teachers and water treatment plants. But he has this network. But none of them are like military guys. They're just random, just normal people or kind of government-ish kind of people or lawyer-ish people.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, we get it. We get it, man. We're a bunch of nerds. Like, where are the Navy SEALs? Where are the spies?
Right? And so, he calls me kind of trying to see like if we can talk and we can brainstorm together about what might be able to do. So he calls me and he says, hey man, like, you know what happened? And with Kim Jong-un, I'm like, yeah, of course. And he says, oh, where are you right now? And I was in Manila at the time, just a hop, skip away, because I had recently sold my company and I had a little bit of time. And like, what better time than then just to do a little traveling?
Yeah.
And I had like one of my best friends was Filipino. He was going to go back and visit his family. He's like, come on with. I was like, yeah, that sounds awesome.
You're munching on lechon, and he's like, do you want to hide an internationally, possibly endangered, hunted man with North Koreans chasing him? And you're like, let me finish my lunch and I'll be right over.
So when that call happened, it was like 9:30, 10 o'clock-ish at night. And I was on a rooftop bar at a hostel. It's like a nice hostel. It's one of my friends' kind of place. And, I'm like 5 beers deep in, you know what I mean? And I'm hanging out with all these people that are traveling from all around the world, having a good-ass time. And I get this call, and he's like, where are you? And I'm like, I'm in Manila. And so he's like, oh, crap. So, okay, do you think that you can go to Taiwan and meet the family there and keep them safe while I start reaching out to other people in the network to try to figure out where he can go, who he can talk to, and where we can arrange something so that he can find asylum somewhere. And I said, well, what is it that exactly that I'm supposed to do? Like, what is it that you want me to do? And he said, well, he's going to be like, what the plan is that we want him to fly into Taiwan's international airport. You meet him at the airport and just keep him calm and keep him safe. And I thought about it and I thought to myself, yeah, like this is kind of a weird situation. His dad just got murdered in an airport and like,
take him to this other airport.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. But then at the same time, like if you just think about it, anyone who's ever gone to an airport, right, when the murder happened, didn't happen inside the secured area. Right, that happened like near the front door of when you walk into the airport. And what they were asking me to do is go past several security checkpoints. Right, and go into a secure location. And he is also going to go through several checkpoints so that and fly into that airport so that anyone in that airport would have to go through several security checks.
They've been identified. They don't have a weapon on them that's obvious.
Right.
It's a hard, and trying to get away after attacking somebody is nearly impossible.
Exactly.
So you just figure it's a safer location.
Well, again, I'm not going to say that it's safe. Right.
Well, you're talking about nation states, so nothing is really safe.
Yeah, but we're talking about exactly right where this kid's life is on the line. I'm being asked to help this kid out, and the risk that's involved, you have to kind of understand it and see it from a sliding scale, right? And I asked Adrian, well, like who else might be able to do this? And he's like, well, We have no idea when they're going to come after him. You are theoretically 3 hours away from him. You're the closest guy. Do you think that you might be able to go to that airport and just hang out with the family while we're able to try to figure out what to do? And I said, well, I mean, yeah, I guess. Yeah, sure. I mean, if I'm the last guy and this guy has nowhere else to turn, and you're asking me to go into a secure location to put my hand on his shoulder and saying like, hey man, I got you. I can do that. You know, in my job at the consulting company that I had recently sold, my job there was the scenario in which I would kind of get these jobs was that a company would, and large companies would go out and like get some services from a big firm or whatever and pay hundreds of thousands of dollars or whatever. And 6 months down the line, they're behind schedule. They're not meeting their numbers. The executives are freaking out. They're going to meet with their board members. Everyone's super stressed. And that's when they call like my company. And my job at the company was to simply sit with the executive and say like, hey, what are your fears right now? And
so you're a professional calmer downer.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what it is that I did as a job, where I would go through like his fears, his risks, and we would sit down and create plans to make sure that we mitigate all of those risks. And again, and most of the time, I'm not the expert who's creating those solutions either. All I am is I'm the conduit to make that guy on the other side of the table feel like someone understands him, someone understands his urgency and his fear and what's on the line, and someone that will equally try to prevent those bad things from happening and make the good things happen, right? That was my job. So when Adrian asked me, can you go and sit with this family and make them feel comfortable, safe, while we try to work this out, I was like, well, I mean, yeah, I guess I could do that, right? I mean, that's kind of what I do.
Yeah, I'm the delight whisperer. I got this.
I mean, like, look, at the end of the day, when Adrian created this Chosen Institute and was asking everyday individuals, what is it that you do on a daily basis? You can provide material help in the future that might be able to help these people's lives. And he was basically asking me the same thing at that moment. Like every day, what you do is you sit down and you make people feel calm and you make people feel recognized and seen. And that's what I do. And so that's what he was asking me to do. And so I said, okay, I got on a plane. I got to the Taiwan airport. And, you know, I'm not some Navy SEAL guy, but I've seen some movies, right? Like, so I start kind of walking around the airport, making sure I know where kind of the exits are and where some safe places could be. And, you know, and when he arrived, you know, I looked him in the eye and I said, hey man, I got you. You know, I looked at his
He knew you were coming, right? Because if he sees a Korean guy, it could go either way.
Yeah. I was supposed to go by the name Steve, you know, and I saw him coming off the plane and, you know, I told him that I'd be wearing a Dodgers hat. And he saw me and he looks at me and he goes, Steve? I go, yeah, that's me. And I looked at him and I said, hey man, I got you. You know, I went up to his mother and I said in Korean, like, you know, I understand how scary this is. I'm here to help you. And, you know, I took him to a place and where he eventually ended up in like a lounge, like an executive lounge area where, you know, they have like little hotel rooms. Mm-hmm. And Hansel and I and his family stayed there for a couple days trying to figure out
in the airport,
trying to figure out what, you know, how and where to go. And, you know, and that's kind of the inflection point of when things started to change, you know? Yeah, I mean, like, look, I mean, I heard you talk about the situation and, you know, you said like, you know, why would you know, these guys, the Hansel and his family go with these knuckleheads to Amsterdam, and the goal of the group wasn't to necessarily have him end up in Amsterdam, was to get to a place where he's safe so that they can figure out what the future was going to be. And like, you're not going to get that from a headline, and you're not going to get that from, you know, just, you know, some random kind of going across, you know, story. So like, I totally understand why someone would think that this was like kind of knuckleheady kind of thing. And I'm more than willing to stand up to, I guess, public judgment on whether people approve of doing something like that.
I think most people approve. I think the knucklehead part is there was no better plan in place. No offense, but like they were grasping at straws, calling in some dude who was 5 beers deep in a Manila youth hostel.
Exactly.
To go and handle this.
Exactly.
And I think we talked about this on Bradley's show as well, but he never made it to Amsterdam, right?
Yeah, he never made it to Amsterdam.
What happened?
I have no idea. When we were there in Taiwan, the CIA guys showed up, and, when they did, I was relieved, right?
Yeah.
Like, like the real guys are here, right? But at the same time, my job there was to make sure that the family was safe. And so I always told them, the family, I said, look, the CIA is here. They want to talk to you. You don't have to talk to them if you don't want to talk to them, right? I'm here for you. I am not here to help them. I'm here to help you. And so, I helped make them feel like comfortable talking to the CIA guys. And when they got on the plane together, they probably continued to have more conversations, and then they decided to go where they wanted to go.
Because the flight was booked to Amsterdam, and then they just never got off the plane. Is that kind of how it ended?
Yeah.
This is like straight out of a movie. Like, oh, we're all on the plane, okay, and then they're gone. And has anyone heard from him since then?
No. I mean, I remember speaking to Adrian one time, and he told me that he got word that they're safe. And that's pretty much that's all I got. But again, like, Amsterdam wasn't the final location, right? It was a place where they know that there was a group of people willing to keep him safe there while they continue to work out where he would go next.
And are these diplomats that are reaching out to the group?
So it's diplomats, scientists, people who are in positions of privilege that they're able to travel out, have recognized what, the situation that they're in, and want to create a better life for their family, And the way that it would normally work would be that they would reach out to the group, and the group would work out how that would occur. And if they felt that, that they needed some extra help, like on the emotional coaching, if you want to call it that, then they would send me a message. And I would say, okay, well, what's going on? And if they can, they would tell me, but most of the time they didn't. They would just say, like, we're doing something similar to what we did last time, and we would need your help. And I would show up to a designated place, and I would meet the people who were there. And I didn't know their name. We were all going by, certain pseudonyms, right? Like, I think my name was like Steve at one point, and there was a couple other names, but nobody
come up with any code name you wanted.
Yeah.
You chose Steve.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, right? Like, I always thought it was like I didn't want to walk around being called Snake Eyes or something like that.
I don't know, man. It's not as bad as Steve, but it's, yeah.
I think that's the idea, though. It's rather nondescript.
That's right. I know. I'm just kidding, obviously.
Like, if someone's like, hey, Snake Eyes, like, I wouldn't like be, what? Oh, that's me? Like, I wouldn't turn, my head for that.
Just to be clear, when you talk about emotional coaching, so you're in a way the defector whisperer a little bit?
If you want to call it that.
But help us understand, like, your job there was to help people get comfortable with the idea.
Yes. So the thing is this, it's like, look, if they've shown the immense courage to reach out to this email address,
which is a big deal.
It's a big, big deal. Knowing that the moment that they push send, it could mean the death of them, their family, and their family at home.
Right.
Right? We understand that. I understand that. So my job was that, like, if they're willing to do that, we're willing to go the extra mile to make sure that happens. That the risk that they took and the trust that they gave us, that we are there to help them go the rest of the way. Because the hardest part is pushing that message to send. But the second hardest part is actually crossing that line, right? And when I would go and meet with these people, I would tell them in Korean, I say, look, what you did is, and what we're going to do is going to be the hardest thing and the most scariest thing in your life. But I am me. Physically, I am the result of people who've made those similar decisions. When my family came to the United States, and it's a totally different circumstance, I'm not trying to equate my situation with your situation. But you have to understand, when my parents came, they didn't know what the future was going to be. They just knew that their life circumstance at the current time was not something that they wanted to continue to when they wanted to make a family. And they were willing to take the risk to go to an unknown land where they've been told that there are opportunities and that there may be a better chance for them. They've decided to leave everything that they know behind to start this new life. You know, like that's something that people who are born in the United States, I don't think that they understand and recognize enough, that these immigrants, whether it be from Korea or from wherever else, these decisions that they're making are extremely scary and difficult to make. They're leaving behind their home, their family, their friends, and everything that they know because they're trying to make it better for their children. That's what I understand. Mm-hmm. And so when I sit with them and I say, look, you are making the most scariest decision, much more than would be for an average person, but I am a result of those types of decisions. I have a nice job. I have a nice car. I have a nice place where I live. I have a family, and I live in relative comfort because my parents made these types of decisions. And so when you get scared, remember why you are making this decision, right? And I am here. We are all here. We flew thousands of miles because we recognize how scary this is. And we want to make sure that whatever you do moving forward, we are here to support you. And we are there to make sure that you do not feel that you made this wrong choice or that you are alone, because you are not alone. We are here with you. And that's what we came to do.
I can see why you're good at this, by the way. I'm pretty amped up for this podcast. I'm not even defecting, and I can see why you're extremely confidence-inspiring in somebody who is making the scariest decision of their life.
I'm not the star here. The people who made these decisions, they're the heroes here. I'm just simply trying to support them in their actions, in their heroic actions, you know. And so, you know, a lot of times it would literally be me just sitting next to them. And if it was the wife or a child, it's me holding their hand or me putting my hand on the guy's back and saying, like, we are all physically here for you and to support you, and you won't be alone. And that was kind of the standard. So when we would get, you know, the organization would get these requests, they would work out with the person who's requesting the defection as well as what they had capabilities of. But at the end of the day, these are just a bunch of guys, the khaki wearing guys with normal day jobs who like were given the same situation where this person would like to escape. You have certain skills where you know people or you this or that or whatever. Can you help? And you are in a unique position to help because you speak Korean. You have relevant experience in doing what it is that we need to do. And you're not going to ask for quid pro quo in any kind of way, right? Like, I'm not representing some type of interest where if I help you, you now have to help us or something like that. It was nothing like that. It's just the fact that as a Korean American, understanding the situation that they're in, experiencing and seeing other people experience desperation where they have nowhere else to turn. For me, and for others who are working with me, you put that in front of them, and the common thing that we share, we come from all different places in the world, and the majority of us were Korean descent, but not all of us. But the one thing that we all did share is that when you are given this option and this choice of whether to help this person or whether not to, I'm not the type of person that can say no to that and then look at myself in the mirror. And that's ultimately what it comes down to.
Thanks for watching on YouTube. Remember, you can also enjoy The Jordan Harbinger Show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Our podcast feed is a treasure trove of insights from intellectuals, authors, spies, artists, athletes, pioneers, engineers, former mafia bosses, and business leaders, all sharing their secrets to success. For more information, click the link in the description. Now, back to the show. I would love to hear a little bit about how this went down, because I think when it hit the news, first off, everybody read that story 14 times. Like, can I even believe what this is? I almost thought this didn't happen. It's one of those clickbaity pieces, and it's going to turn into a big nothing burger. But that's not what happened.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, the fact of the matter is that this is an ongoing case. And so, what I say and how I say it and everything that I say is going to be extremely scrutinized, right? So
I think we have to get closer. Yeah, you can move closer if you need to.
Yeah. So, everything I say is going to be extremely scrutinized. So there's only a certain amount of things that I can say. And the things that I can say is that, look, like I went there because people were asking for help, and there really isn't so much more in terms of motivation other than that. And that, when we got there, we were supposed to be in and out very quickly. And things happened, and we needed to make sure that, we were putting the people who we were trying to help's safety as paramount. And then after that, obviously, our safety, right? But at the end of the day, the people who went there to help them, with me included, was doing this because, these people were in a very desperate situation. And, it's not as if, like if you were a North Korean official, right? And you were raised as in a privileged position in North Korea, and you're essentially told your entire life that North Korea is the best, right? And you live your life surrounded with propaganda that basically says that, like, where you are is where you need to be because it's the best, and you should feel lucky for where you are, and and you're a North Korean, you're a Korean person, and we're the best in the world, whatnot. And then they go to these countries in the West, and they're surrounded by the reality of the fact that, their entire life has been a lie. And these people are put in a position where, you have to deal with the fact that what do you do with this information now, right? You grow up your entire life with a specific perspective and a way you want to live your life in a privileged position. And then you go somewhere and you learn that everything is a lie. And you know this better than I do. Like the people in the embassy, they have to fend for themselves. They go there and they have to earn money by doing like the most menial things because they can't survive without it.
They get busted selling heroin and stupid crap like that.
Yeah.
The diplomats
because they're bringing things in through like their diplomatic pouches and stuff, and so none of the stuff that they can do is on scale or anything like that. They're just kind of living hand to mouth, and so they're living this like life where there's this stark contrast of what they were told, how they were raised, and now being surrounded in a world that is a complete contradiction to that. Like, these are North Korean officials, and we can go on and on about how terrible North Korea is and whatnot. But at the end of the day, these are also just people who have the same motivations that you and I do, right? We want to make our lives better for those who we care about the most. And when they're in that situation, what are they supposed to do? Right? It's not like they can go to an American embassy and just say like, hey, just kidding, I'm done. Like, I don't want to do this anymore, right? Like, you can't do that. Like, their entire life was about that America and the West is the enemy. And, we all know that they leave behind human collateral. So if they do something that's against the regime, or they do anything that is considered, not proper, then there is some heavy, heavy consequences that they're going to be facing. And oftentimes it's not even going to be them. It's going to be their family members.
Right. So for people who maybe don't know what you're exactly referring to, diplomats, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, diplomats from North Korea have to go abroad and leave a spouse, a child, their parents, whatever, back in North Korea. And the unspoken or possibly very explicit deal is if they defect, those people go to prison and die there.
That whole thing and how that revolves kind of led down the path to what eventually, when that choice was given to me, when that phone call came and said that, like, these people, they have nowhere to go. their fate, if they continue down the road that they're on, is sealed, right? If they try to defect, then they're either going to be executed, or the people back in North Korea are going to be executed, or they just resign to their fate and just go back to North Korea. And knowing the fact that their children and their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren are going to be, in that life, living in North Korea, when there is this whole world of opportunity and a better life for them out there. I mean, it's in a weird way, it's a very common immigrant story, just with the stakes turned up all the way as high as you can get.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. You're essentially thinking, I need to help these people. I need to rescue these people. They can't escape on their own. Is the best idea then to say, well, what if they didn't escape? What if they were kidnapped? Is that kind of the idea behind this?
Well, I think you're starting at a position with that question that I came up with the plan, or that I was involved with creating that plan. Like, I showed up that morning.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Right, okay.
So the way that this works is that, like, in the past and in every other kind of activity that I helped out with, they would send me a message saying that, like, hey, we need your help. And I would say, okay, let me check my schedule, see what I can do. And I would show up, and then I would perform in the way that I expected to perform there, and then we'd call it a day, and then I'd go back to living my life. When they originally asked me, I actually said no. I didn't have time that weekend. I was involved with a startup, and we had some meetings with some possible investors. I'm just a normal guy, right? Like, I'm not running around doing, like, trying to raise a rebellion for North Korea stuff.
No time for an embassy raid.
Right, exactly, right? I'm just a guy, right? And so, but the call came in, and so I moved some things around, and then I bought some plane tickets, and I showed up. And when I showed up that day, that's the day that they briefed me on what was happening, what the requests were, what the plan was, and then off we went.
So up to that moment, you didn't know exactly what was going to happen.
No.
You arrived saying, I want to be of service.
Yes.
And when I get there, they're going to tell me what the plan is.
Yes.
They told you the plan, and then you said, okay.
Yes.
Got it. And then what happened?
And again, I want to make sure that I'm very clear in the fact that, like, I am not trying to distance myself from Free Chosun whatsoever, right? But I never considered myself some kind of card-carrying member, or that I'm on, like, the team to create, like, what the group's going to do and which missions we decide to do and whatnot. Like, I'm as much of a member of Free Chosun as I am a member of Habitat for Humanity. If I go out and help build homes over the weekend, does that make me a member? I mean, I guess, right? But, like, I'm not going and deciding what and how and things of that nature, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So when the call for the Madrid operation came in, as I understand it, because I wasn't on the planning of this, is that one of the main things that they wanted to prevent was something like that happening again, that the family unit is able to be maintained and intact, and that these parents aren't given this prisoner's dilemma kind of situation where there is no right answer. And so those who were requesting the defection, and those and the team that was creating the plan had come up with the plan together, because they felt that this would provide enough coverage so that the entire embassy would be able to leave without anyone being put in a position where they had to make this difficult type of choice. That's one of the reasons why, the type of activity was chosen. But at the same time, it's also because, like, North Korea was noticing that diplomats were starting to disappear. Like, important people that they're sending is starting to disappear, and there's no reason why. And so the more that you just continue to do this, the more suspicious it's going to look for everybody.
So they don't know that these people are defecting in the moment?
Correct.
They just, like, oh, we haven't been able to get a hold of them.
Correct.
Or this person died. That's weird. Oh, this other person just died. What are the odds of that?
Correct.
Okay.
And so you can only do that for so long.
Right. You get, like, 2 deaths before it's a really obvious fake coincidence.
Right. And so again, I'm not the one who created this plan, but, like, it made sense to me when I flew in that morning. And they said, okay, here's kind of the situation and here's the plan. Knowing what I had experienced in the past, knowing how much time and effort is taken and the cooperation that's taken place at the time of all these defections, it made sense to me. And when I arrived, I understood why they were asking me multiple times to come, because this was a bigger operation than normal. You were asking a mass defection, and that needed to be coordinated. And there were going to be multiple people who were scared, multiple people that were making this decision that we had talked about. And they wanted to make sure that, like, if anyone starts getting too scared or kind of having an issue with whether panicking or whatever it is, that, like, I'm there to sit with them and be with them.
When you say a mass defection, you're suggesting that multiple people in the embassy had expressed that they wanted to defect.
Correct.
More than one.
Correct. So as I understand it, when I arrived there in Spain, I was told that the entire embassy wanted to defect.
All of them.
Yes.
Wow.
Every single person in the building.
Yes.
Wow.
So that's why that something like this would make sense.
Now, part of the interesting thing about this story is that it didn't go according to plan perfectly.
Correct.
My understanding, I would love for you to speak to this, is that there was at least one person who didn't quite go along with the plan. How does that fit with the fact that everybody in the building wanted to defect?
Well, I mean, I can't tell you what that person was thinking, obviously.
Yeah. For everybody who doesn't know, my understanding based on what's been in the media is that there was one woman in the building who, depending on how you look at things, either panicked and changed her mind or didn't want to go along with the plan from the beginning, got to another room, I believe jumped off of a balcony, ran to the street. I think she might have eventually found an ambulance. She was treated for some injuries and then eventually called the police or had somebody call the police for her. And that's more or less where the mission started to go sideways.
Correct.
So you're saying that this woman originally wanted to defect, but got a little spooked by the idea of going through with it.
Correct. That's what I was told, yes.
So that's pretty common in your experience for people who are, I mean, it's a big leap to make. So your story, your understanding of this is that in the moment she said, I don't know if I can go through with this.
To me, for someone to react that way when you're asking them to defect,
is par for the course.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, like, it's totally understandable, you know? And, you know, so, you know, the idea was to go in, do our little act in front of the cameras to make sure that, you know, we've got enough cover, in, out, bing, bang, boom. The North Korean embassy is a house. And when I say a house, I mean like a driveway, you know, they got a little basketball court on the side. Like, it's a house. There's no guards. There's no people who are trying to keep it safe or anything like that. There are just people who live in there, who do illegal activities to pay the bills and pay for their food. And when they were asked, and when we went in to do it, we didn't break down doors. We didn't hurt anybody.
What does the North Korean embassy look like inside? I'm not picturing an opulent circumstance.
Yeah. So I got to tell you, I didn't know what to expect, but I didn't expect what I saw, which was just like, it's just nothing.
IKEA furniture.
IKEA furniture. Like, it's just,
really?
Yeah. I mean, I here, let me actually, no, not that nice.
Oh my gosh.
You know what I mean? Like,
Sounds
it
like my
was
college
It was just
experience.
like particle board garbage around. Everything was just like really bad. At one point, I went into the kitchen to grab some like beverages or something so I can give it to them so that they're comfortable and stuff. And I opened up the refrigerator and it was nothing in there. And I remember that exact moment. I opened up that refrigerator and I felt such sadness for these guys, right? Like, you know, take away all the terrible things, but, you know, like, these guys are living hand to mouth and they're supposed to be the elites and they can barely have food in the fridge. And I remember feeling like, wow, this is so sad, to immediately thinking, oh man, it's going to be great because tonight I'm going to, I put down a shopping list because I was planning after the embassy raid. I was going to go to the supermarket and buy a bunch of food and stuff and do like a barbecue or something like that, so I can feed all these people. And so I was getting excited that like they would go from this situation where there's no food in the refrigerator to giving them like a taste of like what their life is going to be like, where like a food.
Try these ribs.
Yeah. Right. And so, but yeah, there was like almost no furniture. There was like no carpet or anything like that. So the walls are basically bare except for the propaganda stuff.
So they put up the posters.
Yeah, like the pictures of Kim Il Sung and Kim Jong-il, like they're all there, and like like just like if you walked in there, you would be like, this is crazy. Like, wow, look at this stuff, right? And that's exactly how I felt. But that's it. There's no like art or kids' drawings of what the kid did. There was just nothing there, and so it was very cavernous and echoey because it is like a nicer house. So there's lots of rooms and stuff like that. But it's just, as most things, it's just a facade. And inside there was just nothing. And so
the cops come to the door and you're like, nope, nothing to see here.
Yeah, so the cops come to the door.
Did you answer the door?
Adrian answered the door.
Did he put a pin on and pretend he was North Korean or something?
He put a pin on and told him. And so like after they went away, we were like, okay, great. But the people inside, they asked like, who's at the door? And we're not going to lie to them. It's like, oh, it was the police. And, we say that and you just see the color in their face just completely drop out, right? Because they went from feeling kind of excited and like, well, like at first it's like this range of emotions, right? Like it's, oh my God, we've been found out, like everything is a failure.
Terrifying.
Terrified.
And also, I would imagine, a bit terrifying for you.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, what's going through your head at that point?
Well, I mean, at that point, like, I was trying to convince them that, like, no, this actually plays in our favor. At a certain point, they basically came to the decision that they didn't want to do this anymore. And what are we going to do? We're not going to force them.
Right, you can't.
All of them?
Well, I mean, it was basically the word was passed down that like it's not going to happen.
But also, like, two people can't be like, I'm defecting, because the other people will be like, no, then they have to tell. I mean, they're going to have to tell
exactly
what happened. Like, okay, so you got kidnapped, but they only took him and her out of the place? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, so at a certain point, the guy, the main guy, he gives us the keys to the cars, and he just says, hey, man, just go. We'll take care of it.
So they decided on their own when they saw that things were going sideways that they did not want to go through with it?
Correct.
And it sort of trickled through the group?
Correct.
We're no longer going to do this?
Correct.
But it was the guy who originally reached out?
Correct.
Who said, I'm changing my mind?
Wow.
Correct. Okay.
And they're like, take one of our cars and just get out.
Well, just take all the cars, right? Like, he didn't care. He just wanted us to leave because they needed to kind of figure out like how they're going to
explain
all this.
Isn't it?
So what happened was after the cops left, the phone starts ringing, right? And there's multiple phones in the house, and there's no furniture, and it's very cavernous, and it's not like we're going to pick up the phone, right? And so this phone just ringing and ringing and ringing, and it echoing throughout the entire house, and like it won't stop calling, right? And so if there was any kind of chance that we had to make it feel like, don't worry, we can do this, we got this. All we need to do is walk out that door, and then everything's going to be fine. But then there's this ringing, constant echoing ringing that's like constantly there.
And they think it's Kim Jong-un calling to be like, why are you leaving?
Exactly.
Yeah, oh my God, it's like a horror movie, dude.
So I was working with and talking with the group, just asking them that everything's going to be okay. And then, the other guys were working with the main guy to kind of figure out the logistics of like, how with this new stuff and situation, and he's feeling unsure of whether he wants to do it and all this kinds of stuff. But my primary role was just to simply sit down with the rest of the folks there and kind of stew in the fear with them. That's kind of how I approached it.
I just have to ask one thing, which is it came out after the fact that one subplot of the raid, of the mission, was that some assets were taken from the embassy.
Yes.
I believe there was at least one hard drive, at least one computer, and a cell phone.
So I actually never touched any of that stuff.
Was that part of the cover?
Oh, yeah. So, they decide to, in order for this whole kind of ruse to be correct and believable, we left all the gear there, and some of the guys, I guess, took some hard drives or whatever, and then we left.
So that was part of the cover.
Correct.
Was there any aspect of that Free Joseon maybe wanted to have those assets, a hard drive, to find out what's on it or to do anything with?
Not that I know of. I mean, if they did, then I wasn't aware of that. And it was never told to me in the beginning of the plan that we were going to be taking out stuff like that.
Got it.
Right? It was always just about the people getting in and getting out.
Got it. Take us out of the embassy.
Yeah. How did you get out of it?
Let's tell the rest of that story. And then
Yeah, I mean, so I can't get too much into it, but at the end of the day, what happened was he basically said, like, look, this isn't going to happen.
This is the chief diplomat.
Correct. He said, it's not going to happen. Take the cars and leave, and we'll figure it out on our own, right? So, and we came to, it's not even a decision. It's just like, that's what it is now, right? Like, we're not going to force these guys to leave. So we get in the cars and we leave, and we are concerned that with the phone calls that there are North Koreans in Spain. There's a lot of North Koreans in Spain. And
why?
It's their hub for all international or for European illicit activities. So if there's a 60 Minutes Australia episode where they hired the reporters, the investigative reporters, acted like they were arms dealers to go buy arms from North Korea, and they will go to Spain. And Spain is where they go and do all the deals. And if you watch the episode there, they actually get invited to go to North Korea.
There's that dude Alejandro Caldemenos or whatever, who's like their little stooge.
Yeah. So there's a lot of North Korea doesn't have a gross domestic product or thing that they export, right? They export guns and ammunition and weapons and drugs and slave labor and stuff. So
and some primo propaganda posters.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so a lot of that stuff happens in Spain. Right, and so we leave, and we kind of understand that there may be North Koreans who have become suspicious. That's who's calling probably, who are suspicious of what's going on, and that there could be a possibility, that there are going to be North Koreans who are going to descend onto the embassy to find out what's going on, and then from there disseminate out to go look for us. Right, we don't know.
So that's scary as hell, because these are not students studying abroad in Spain.
Correct.
These are gangster or intelligence agents or whatever operating on behalf of North Korea, and they're possibly driving there at breakneck speed to find out why there's nobody answering the phone.
Exactly. Wow. So one thing led to another, where I found a cab and I convinced the guy to take us to Portugal.
That's like a 6 hour drive.
Yeah, 6 hour drive.
So you guys all scatter in the wind.
So we all scatter, and then the idea was to meet back up in the States, and everyone was supposed to meet in New York, where they were going to basically, debrief, go over what went right, what went wrong, and kind of lament over the fact that it didn't go well. I, however, had that investor meeting that I had pushed back. So I didn't go to New York. I flew directly back to Los Angeles.
How do you do an investor meeting after that? You're just like, well, let me just take my embassy braid hat off and put my venture capital hat on.
The plane ride home alone would be so bizarre. What's going through your head?
I mean, look, I'm not going to deny any of those feelings, feeling weird, of course. The answer to that is yes. I came back to LA and went back to living my life. I'm just being the normal dude that I am.
So, the normal dude that you are. So when does this sort of catch up with you? And it's like, you broke into an embassy, allegedly. We might want to talk to you about that.
Yeah. So, Adrian calls me after the debrief that he has with everybody in New York. And he says, hey, we're going to go talk to the FBI about this to make sure that they know what's going on. And by the way, one of the things that we did as soon as we left the embassy was we wanted to make sure that the North Koreans there were going to be as safe as we can possibly be. And so someone from the group sent the Spanish government at another, their ministry of, or their version of the State Department, and sent an email or a note to their State Department that said, look, we were involved in something that happened at the North Korean embassy. We can't really get into it, but their lives are in danger. And so if you see people coming in from North Korea, specifically for these North Koreans at the embassy, please be aware that their lives could be on the line and it's a very dangerous situation. So we tried to warn the Spanish government about what's going on. When we came back, Adrian went and talked to the FBI, and the FBI asked Adrian if they could talk to other people who were involved. He asked me, like, would you be willing to talk to the FBI? And I said, yeah, sure. Like, I don't got nothing to hide.
Oh no, you didn't get a lawyer first, huh?
Yeah. You know, and
No!
But that's interesting because that means that what's going through your head is, I haven't done anything
I haven't done anything wrong.
I've tried to help.
Correct.
It didn't go the way we wanted.
Correct.
And if I can help the FBI and give them some information, I'm happy to do
I
that.
totally understand that line of thought, except everything I learned in law school is don't ever do that.
Right. No, I get it.
But
I get it.
it speaks to Christopher's state of mind.
Yeah,
at
it
the
speaks to
time,
your state
which
of
I
mind.
think a lot of people might not fully appreciate just based on the bullet points in the media.
Sure, sure. And so, you know, they set up a date to come over. And the day before, I had made, I think it was snickerdoodles. I had made some snickerdoodles the day before. And so when
Like cookies?
Cookies, yeah.
Okay.
And so when the FBI agents came in, I came in. I said, hey, I made some snickerdoodles. Would you like some snickerdoodles? And I gave them some cookies and some coffee and stuff like that. And we just kind of hashed it out.
Got it. So you'll make snickerdoodles for the FBI, but you arrive here empty-handed. Continue.
And, you know, they asked me questions about stuff, and I try to make it very clear that said, like, look, the reason why I'm talking to you is because I want to make sure that, number one, that, like, you understand that, like, we're all on the same team here, right? Like, I'm not trying to do something nefarious or anything like that. These guys wanted to escape. They felt like they had no one else to turn to. They asked me to help. I wasn't asked to do anything illegal, right? I didn't hurt anybody. I didn't break into anything. Everything was voluntary. And I'm here to tell you that, like, so you know, like, what happened. And so you can tell whoever you need to tell that, like, that's what's going on, you know? And before we left, I said, like, so, like, are we cool? Or, like, is everything good? And the FBI guys were like, yeah. And I said, okay, cool. And went back to living my life.
So that must have been a relief to hear that from
Well,
the
yeah, of
FBI.
course.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, like, yes and kind of no, because, like, I didn't really feel like I had anything to be afraid of. You know, like,
Oh, that's true, right? So you're not even you're just like, well, I guess I closed the loop on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
That's
I
over.
understand.
That chapter's done.
yeah,
That
yeah,
mission
and
is
it's not as if, like, the FBI didn't know the things that Adrian was doing and have a long relationship with him, and you know, and, like, they are in the know. So I'm just kind of like their double check to make sure that what
Yeah.
they think they know is true.
Because there's a point at which Spain's like, this is terrorism or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And they obviously didn't see it the same way.
Well, so I mean, the sequence of events from my perspective, right? Because I know that occurred, but I don't really know when exactly that occurred. Like, the FBI came over. You know, I gave them the cookies that I made. We you know, we shared and we hashed it out. And then 2 weeks, and I thought we were cool. And then 2 weeks later, I get a phone call from the agent saying, like, hey, I just need to let you know that North Korea has discovered your identity, and we have confirmed reports that they are going to try to assassinate you.
Oh God, I thought you were gonna say, like, have you arrested in Spain?
No.
Wow. So they were just like, find these guys and kill them.
Yeah. So
Holy
the
shit.
FBI called me and said, like, look, they know your identity. We have positive confirmed reports that they're going to try to assassinate you. So it's imperative that, number one, you stay in the United States, and number two, that you stay vigilant, right? We don't think that anything's going to happen here in the United States, but at the same time, we do know that there's North Koreans here, and who knows, right?
Steve, lock the door. But yeah, that's terrifying.
Yeah.
All jokes aside, like, that's you at this point. What's going through your mind?
Well, first thing is, like, a little bit of, well, my first reaction is, like, what the
yeah,
right?
of course.
And number two, how the hell do they know? Because every single time I've ever done this operation or doing defections or whatever, nobody knows my name. Like, literally nobody knows my name. They may know where I come from because I'm like, yeah, I'm from California, kind of a thing. Because it's kind of hard to hide the fact that I'm from California with the way I speak and everything. So, like, they know that I'm from California and I may be a guy named Steve, you know? And so how do they know my identity? And I told them, I said, the only people that know my identity is you, right? So how does Spain and North Korea or anyone know my identity when the only people that know my identity is you?
The FBI.
Yeah, the FBI.
Do you have any speculation as to how they found out?
Well, I mean, I think I've learned just from reading the same things that you have, right? Like I haven't been privy to some kind of other information, because from that point on, right? Like from this moment of the story on, the only access that I have is the same access that you have.
I can't guess how they figured out who you are.
Well, from what I understand is that they basically cooperated with Spain, and they gave my identity.
The FBI did.
Correct.
So they gave your identity to Spain, who turns around and tells North Korea who you are.
Correct.
That is bananas. That's so reckless of them, knowing like, oh yeah, the guy who killed his brother, yeah, you can leave all the names in the document that we're sending over.
Yeah. And so, I asked them, like, what do I do? They say, like, well, just stay safe. So, like, what am I supposed to do with that information?
Yeah, thanks for the advice,
How do
bro.
you stay safe from North Korea?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
so, like, so now, like, if they know my identity, that means they know my mom's identity, my grandmother's identity, my brother's identity, everyone that I'm associated with identity. I'm not like I'm a private person in terms of, like, I'm not, like, on social media all the time and doing whatever, but
you're not some billionaire who can hide with bodyguards.
I'm just a normal guy,
chateau.
right? And so like you want to look me up in the phone book or whatever, like I'm gonna be there, right? And so I felt the best thing that I could do at that moment was I have two options. I could either live my life in like perpetual fear and like lock up my entire family, or just accept that like I'm in the safest place in the world, and the likeliness of them trying to hurt me or my family here on American soil is very, very low.
It is low.
And so I'm just going to kind of put up some Ring cameras in my mom's house and just kind of make sure, like tell my mom and my dad or my brother to kind of be extra safe and be aware of like their surroundings. But I'm not going to tell them like, hey, North Korean assassins might be after you. And like I'm not going to do that.
And how much
a snickerdoodle.
Yeah. How much does your family know about what you were up to?
Nothing.
So, but what did you tell them?
Well, I didn't have time really to kind of tell them.
Is this the first time you told them that you've been up to these extra?
No, I didn't tell them that at all either.
At all.
Right. So, so immediately after that, the phone call from the FBI, I call Adrian and I'm like, hey man, like what the hell is going on? Like, what are we going to do? And I think like the day after that, Adrian's name was in the paper saying that he was involved in this. And next thing you know, reporters and all these people are flooding into where he lives, trying to like talk to him and get an interview from him or whatever, and hassling their family and stuff. And so like he basically says like, hey man, I gotta get out of where I am just for the safety of my family. So he kind of packs up and leaves, right? But before he goes, he kind of left everything, and he gave me a spare key saying like, hey, if like my wife needs to come and get something or whatever, can you hold the spare key for me? And I was like, yeah, sure. And then a couple weeks after the phone call, he calls me and he says, hey, my wife is going to be coming up to the house or the apartment. Can you just be there to make sure that if someone's trying to hassle her, that you just kind of, let her have some space and go with her inside the apartment and make sure everything's cool.
Check for North Korean assassins.
Yeah, we got to do this ridiculous stuff now, right? So I'm like, yeah, dude, no problem. So I go to the apartment just to kind of make sure everything's cool. He had sent me a bunch of these Ring cameras because he was going to get them for him and his family. And he asked me if I wanted one. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll take one. But when it arrived, I was expecting like these doorbell camera kind of things.
Right.
And what showed up was like these super buff, floodlights, like
you got the outdoor one.
Yeah.
This episode's sponsored by Simply Safe, keeping you safe from North Korean assassins since 2017.
And I'm not putting that up in my mom's house, right? Like why? Like there's going to be a lot of questions that my mom's going to be asking of why are you like lighting up the entire front yard and all that kind of stuff.
I just wanted it to look like the DMZ.
Yeah. And so I was like, nah, I don't need this stuff. I'm just going to get some like Ring cameras and stuff. So he's like, all right, just drop it off at the apartment when my wife gets there. So I'm up there. I have all these boxes and stuff. And I open the door, and when I go in, the marshals are in there.
U.S. Marshal Service.
U.S. Marshals are in there. And like, I'm surprised because like I wasn't expecting them, and I don't know who the hell these guys are, and they're not expecting me. And so we both kind of I open the door, I walk in, we both kind of lock eyes, and I go like, who the f- are you? Right?
Yeah.
And they lift their guns and say, who the f- are you? And I say like, I'm Christopher Ahn. What are you doing here? And, they come up to me and, they kind of frisk me down. They ask me if I have any weapons. And I have a concealed permit weapon license.
Okay.
And I was told by the FBI they're trying to kill me. So I said, well, I think the pertinent thing to do is to make sure that I'm carrying my weapon.
Sure.
A real one this time.
A real one this
Yeah.
time. And so like when the marshals asked me if I have any weapons, I'm like, yeah, I do. It's on, I have a belly band holster kind of a thing. And that freaks them out. And so like one of the marshals puts like a gun to my head, and it was just like, you move and I'm going to blow your brains out and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like,
Very professional.
Right?
The
Like-
irony that you were afraid of North Korea, and then you go to your friend's apartment and now you're terrified of the U.S. government is very interesting.
yeah. And so like, I'm telling them the same thing that you hear all the time, that anyone who gets arrested is like, this is just a big misunderstanding. Like you got to talk to whoever you need to talk to. Like that's who I sounded like. Right. But at the end of the day, I was like, there's no way that, like this is just a big misunderstanding. Right. Like I told them like, look, I'm not going to fight you with this. I'll go wherever you want to go. But like, you go talk to whoever you need to talk to
Because they were waiting for Adrian,
yeah.
not you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I thought that by that evening that I would be home with my wife, but it ended up me being in, jail for 3.5 months. I was down the street here at the MDC here in Los Angeles, and it's basically pretrial holding, right? Like if they can't trust you to, get bail or whatever, then they hold you there.
So did they think this is a flight risk because he's an international man?
Yeah,
of
I mean,
mystery?
by definition, like when, at first I thought like this is just a big misunderstanding, and then, I was originally told that my charges were aiding and abetting a fugitive, and I'm like, oh, all right, well that's kind of obvious and easy to kind of disprove, so that should be fine. I don't have a criminal record. If anything, I should be able to get bail. And when the time came to actually stand in front of the judge, like the actual charges that they had against me was like kidnapping and, like assault and all these crazy things, And, I was given the charging document, and I was able to see like what people said, like the North Koreans said I hit them in the face and all this kind of stuff. And, like at the time, my hand was broken. And all the pictures that you see in like this Madrid stuff, like you can see like peeking out of my hand that I have like a soft cast on my hand.
Oh man.
So like I physically couldn't even hurt these people if I wanted to, right? So like none of the evidence really makes sense, So I just thought that like, oh yeah, this is going to be like pretty easy in and out.
Still no lawyer.
Well, I mean, I had the public defender at the time.
Okay.
And can I just clarify something? I think a lot of people are going to be wondering, why are you being charged for these things in America for a crime that supposedly happened in Spain? Can you explain that?
Yeah. So, I'm not actually being charged with anything here in the States.
Okay.
Right. Like if you pull up a background check on me, which I've had to do because I'm trying to find work and stuff like that. And I need to know if anyone, like if they pull a report, what's going to show, and like nothing, maybe a parking ticket from maybe a decade ago, but like I'm a law-abiding citizen. Like I got a concealed weapons permit. They don't just give those things out like candy out
Not
here
in California, that's for sure. Yeah, man.
Yeah. So like, there are multiple things that show that I'm like an upstanding citizen. And it continues to be there, right? Like I have no record. What's actually happening is that Spain is trying to charge me with those charges based upon what the North Koreans have told them. And they are requesting the United States government to extradite me, to send me to Spain to stand trial for those accusations. And for the threshold of whether or not the United States sends someone from here to whatever country is that they have to have probable cause, right? And that's the threshold, which is an extremely low threshold.
It's a low bar, yeah.
And because of the fact that I've never denied being in the embassy in Spain, I've never denied being in Spain, I've never denied any of that stuff. I've always just denied like what happened inside compared to what the North Koreans have said.
They're not worried that you are a flight risk now?
No, they are. But, this took a long time. And, 1,000,000% of credit of that goes to this amazing woman that's sitting next to me here. She was able to help the judge understand of the specific situation that I'm in. And the fact that, like, there are so many things that, like, just don't match up. And that even though I am, a fugitive, that I don't really pose any flight risk. And so me getting the bail was a very difficult uphill battle. I think one time, she told me that I had like less than a 1% chance that I would get bail.
Yes.
But because the judge was able to listen and understand what this whole situation is about and go deeper than, the headlines and kind of understand, she decided to give me bail. And that's why I was able to kind of get out after 3.5 months.
And now you're waiting on, an extradition hearing?
So first, Chris is not charged in the United States with any crime. That's correct. He's being charged in Spain. And to some degree, that's unavoidable, right? Because in Spain, North Korea has diplomatic relations. They have an embassy. And those people have told the Spanish government that they were, somehow held against their will, right? So Spain has no choice but to bring criminal charges. What happens is that Spain then makes a request to the United States and says, we're bringing these charges against someone who's in your country, a citizen of your country, and we need you to extradite them to our country. Typically in federal court, they don't even bring charges unless they have that type of evidence. But here, they really kind of have to honor what Spain is requesting. Now, in our view, this is sort of where the original sin happens, because at that point, a judicious discretionary decision could have been made internally in the executive branch, understanding the situation. At this point, the FBI is in contact with Adrian and even Chris and knows what's going on, and understanding the complicated dynamic where Spain thinks of North Korea as a legitimate embassy present government.
Right, as opposed to a mafia state that will do and say anything.
Correct.
Right.
And the United States understands that these people, the people who are in there trying to help the North Koreans escape, are now in mortal danger. Some discretionary decision could have and should have been made that prevented everyone from being in this terrible situation. But for whatever reason, which we may never find out why, a decision was made to institute extradition proceedings against Chris, against Adrian, perhaps others. They may be sealed extradition cases that we don't know about. So the United States brings these extradition charges, and Chris is the only one who is not in hiding. And so that's why he ends up...
Everybody else disappeared.
Exactly. Everybody else disappears. So, he's not tried to avoid charges in Spain. He's going through a legal process that he's allowed to defend himself against in this country. So he's here. He's always lived in the open. He's not tried to hide himself. He's not tried to escape. The problem is once you are in an extradition proceeding, there's very little chance of getting bail. It's very hard. It's not impossible, but the idea is that you're already in another country from the country that is charging you. So, of course, we're not going to give you bail. And so that's sort of what Chris was talking about.
Even the judge was like, hey, I have to, by law, allow this to go forward, but I hope somebody overrules me, which I didn't practice for a very long time, but I don't imagine most judges say, I hope someone at a higher court overrules my decision.
Correct. So we had the extradition hearing last year where we were able to, present our case. And, we had Otto Warmbier's family come and testify on my behalf. We had...
Otto Warmbier was the 20-year-old student who went on a tour, allegedly took a poster, ended up in a coma, and passed away.
Correct.
In North Korea.
We had an amazing professor from Tufts University who was the premier kind of intellectual of what happens in North Korea. He came out and testified on my behalf. We had letters of supporters from Medal of Honor recipient to those within the previous administration, people I've worked with in charities and nonprofits, police officers, firefighters. And I think we got like 30 letters or something like that from government officials to charities and friends and all these people who are all considered quote unquote like upstanding, Americans. And the judge was able to see kind of what this is, but unfortunately, she's a magistrate judge that felt that she had to, rule the way that she had to, but she was very kind to make sure that she also put her opinion and perspective in there as well.
So what's the fear right now? Is that you'll be extradited to Spain and that you'll either go to prison in Spain or that the North Koreans will try to kill you in Spain?
So the answer is both.
The quandary that we're in right now is that extraditions are usually not like this. This is a strange case, right? And that's why Chris got bail. You have to prove extraordinary circumstances to get bail. In an extradition, usually we have an extradition treaty with a country we've agreed to have an extradition treaty with. The United States doesn't have an extradition treaty with North Korea for a reason, right? You vet the judicial processes and systems of other countries, and you say, if you're not complying with due process, if you're, sort of a torture-friendly country, we're not going to extradite people to your country, and we're not going to expect you to extradite people to ours. So here we have a situation where the United States has an extradition treaty with Spain. Spain kind of passes the smell test, but it's really a criminal case driven by North Korea. And Spain is a country that has its own justice system, but also has a North Korean presence, and not just a North Korean presence, but one that is known and has been confirmed in multiple investigatory reports as having connections to criminal dealings. I guess you can call it the underworld. So that's why the judge in this case found an extraordinary circumstance. She determined that even though Spain has to take these North Korean witnesses at their word, the United States does not have to. And she does not believe that those statements were made voluntarily. She believes that they were probably under, some threat of death, some fear of their lives.
For sure.
And of course, how can any North Korean witness say, oh yeah, we, sort of plotted a fake kidnapping so we could defect, but then we changed our minds. Nobody's going to say that because they're going to be killed, and their families are going to be killed. And so that's the quandary we're in. But the issue is now Chris has bail, so that's a positive. But the negative is that the legal standard for extradition is so low. It's just probable cause. And we do believe, actually, there is room for the court to find there is not probable cause. Right now, the extradition case itself is over, and so the lower judge, the magistrate judge, has found that there is probable cause. We're currently on what's called habeas, where we're asking a district judge who sits one tier higher to make a different decision on that ground. But the main argument that we're making is actually that there's a humanitarian exception to extradition that has never, ever, ever been used. And so, so there's two tracks to...
Literally never?
Never.
Wow. You're making history.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we're hoping for. But every time this argument has come up, it's usually come up in the context of, I'm seeking, Thailand's trying to extradite me for a drug crime, and they give death penalty there for drug crimes. And so, the U.S. should have a humanitarian exception and not send me there. And every time the U.S. has said no. It's too bad, you broke a law in that country. You have to go there and face the consequences. Here, it's very different because Chris is not afraid of Spain killing him.
Right.
He's afraid of North Korea killing him, and North Korea has no treaty with the U.S. They have no, they don't have a history of abiding by international standards. Just standards of decency. So it's a completely different threat. And the other main difference is that part of the reason Chris is in danger is because of decisions and actions the United States took. And so the United States cannot put their own people in danger. That's part of sort of the argument that we're making. And so that makes this kind of a unique case. But it's an incredibly difficult standard. It's one that we are pushing forward in front of the current case. And, we'll see how it goes. But it's never been granted before.
It's an incredibly compelling legal argument, the way you've laid it out. But because of the unique aspects of this case, it sounds complicated, and it sounds like you guys are kind of in uncharted territory. to some degree legally.
That's correct. I mean, any kind of extradition case like this, well, I say any kind of extradition case like this, there is no extradition case like this. You know, the court is not the only way that Chris can get out of the situation, right? I mean, that's one process that we are following. But ultimately, this is up to the United States government, the executive branch. Spain can also make certain decisions that could, you know, end this sort of nightmare. And the fact that I'm here is very unusual. I'm a defense attorney. I do not let my clients sit for interviews. I certainly don't participate in them. But
Well, that was us ambushing you, so that's fair.
but
That's
this
fair.
is a very unusual situation where, you know, there may need to be more public support for any kind of decision, a courageous decision to be made by whatever level of government. And so that's kind of one of the reasons why we're in this unusual situation.
A judge involved in Chris's case, I believe it was Judge Rosenbluth, said, among many other things, even assuming Ahn was acting at the direction of his country and not simply to help those trapped in an evil empire, which was one version of events, that's only but another reason why that same country shouldn't shove him into Kim Jong-un's grasping arms. And I believe the same judge went on to say, yes, Ahn should have to face a court reckoning of some kind for possibly violating at least the letter of the law, but he should not be cast off to face an uncertain fate at the hands of a despot, perhaps sacrificed to advance a foreign policy agenda. When you read opinions like that, does that give you hope and heart for the outcome in Chris's case? What do you take away from that?
Well, it's complicated, my reaction. Of course, we would have wanted his extradition to have been denied, for her to not have certified. But what I hear when I hear that opinion and read her words is, you know, sort of the quandary of a judge who is dealing with a standard of laws that is not allowing her to do what she believes is just and that she believes is necessary to save someone's life. So, you know, in terms of hope, it kind of is a double-edged sword. I mean, she gave us the tools to convince a higher court that the outcome could be different. But at the same time, this was also a judge who so very much wanted to do something to save Chris's life and to keep him safe. And she felt like she couldn't. She looked at all the laws. She felt like she couldn't. Obviously, I disagree. I think she could have, and I hope that another court will feel differently. But ultimately, at the end of the day, there's a real fear that the court system's not going to be able to solve this problem. And so if that's the case, then we need to look to politicians to step in. We need to look to the executive branch to step in and make sure that this group of really volunteers who tried to help people don't end up losing their lives as a result, or even, you know, losing their freedom because they're stuck in a country that has to take these witnesses at their word because of the position that they have in that country.
Can I just say real quick also is that, you know, when the North Korean officials gave their statements, they were given statements with another North Korean official in the room.
Of course. Yeah.
Right. And so none of the stuff that if that kind of evidence and those statements were presented in an American court, they would be totally tossed out immediately because there's a guy that's like, you know, looking at me while I'm giving these statements. You
Right.
know?
And it's like, who's this guy? Some dude from internal security services who's just going to sit in the room?
Oh, we know who that guy was. It was the ambassador, the one who had initially reached out for the defection. So he was the translator for everybody.
So he's just like, everyone's going to do what I say, and I'm the one driving this car.
Correct.
That's
And then, like, if
crazy.
you look at the actual statements themselves, they said that, like, I beat them. But, you know, I've got medical reports and x-rays that show my hands were broken before I got there. And when I came back from Spain, I had more x-rays done just routinely and showed that they were healing. My hand was healing. So my hand didn't get any trauma. You know, at a certain point, they were saying that, like, you know, they like we were eating people in there or something or other.
The woman reported you were eating the children or something like
Right.
that. Yeah.
Right.
Obviously that.
So I mean, there's a lot of things that, you know, in a normal circumstance, like, it wouldn't really pass the smell test, but because of the variety of kind of a uniqueness of this, here I am.
So we're meeting you at a pretty extraordinary moment in your life. You're facing this extradition proceeding. You're not sure what the future holds. How do you feel right now? Like, what's your outlook? What's your mood like? What do you feel like when you wake up in the morning?
Well, I mean, I think it's just like just with anybody else normally, right? It's a spectrum of things that you deal with, right? Like there's a big part of me that feels incredibly, incredibly blessed because I have people like Nayun here. I have people like my wife who have stood by me throughout this entire thing. My wife's family, like my father-in-law, has never questioned me about the things that I've done because he understands. And I've had supporters who've given small amounts of donations, large amounts of donations, and those financial support has literally kept the lights on, because it's incredibly hard to find, reliable work. I've got an MBA, I've owned businesses, I've been a part of some major deals, and I've also dug ditches and been like a manual labor guy. I've done the whole spectrum. You would think that I would be able to kind of, pick myself up and get a job, but because of the circumstances of this, you Google me and, in the beginning it was all negative. Now it's slightly positive, but at the same time, if as a former business owner, I get it. If I've got a guy who's applying for this job that has a history of success, and then I walk, my version of someone walks in and he appears to be successful, but he's got all this baggage. Why would I want to hire this guy? I wouldn't even hire me. You know what I mean? So on one side, I feel so incredibly blessed because, I have such an amazing support system and those who have taken the time to hear my story and look beyond kind of the first headline and the first paragraph of the clickbait article. They understand and they've been able, that's what's carried me through. But at the same time, there's the other side of this where it's incredibly, incredibly difficult to just kind of be here. I've spent my entire life working, helping people, and knowing that I find fulfillment in helping those people who need help. And now I'm here because of using or following, I guess, my heart in terms of doing what I felt was right. And now I don't trust myself. Did I make a mistake? Shouldn't I have not done this? I don't feel like I made a mistake. Everything in my soul tells me I did the right thing, but I'm destitute. I can't pay my bills. I can't support my family. I can't do the things that normal people are able to do. And I struggle with, depression and feeling like I'm a person that deserves, help because I feel like I failed everyone around me, and it's hard, it's hard.
I personally am very impressed by all this. That's an understatement. I mean, you did something that most people would like to think they would try to do and would probably never actually have the guts to do. It didn't work out the way that you wanted it to, but I don't think that negates the fact that you still did it.
Yeah, and so I want to kind of directly address that. And I appreciate that. The first thing I say is thank you. I appreciate that immensely. And I don't want to downplay the things that I was doing to help these people and the immensity of it, right? But I think that the immensity of it is everyone looking at this from a very macro level, where it's North Korea and it's like these defections and death and murder and all these in danger and all this. But those macro things are very, very important. It's why people want to tune in and listen to these kinds of things. But we all live in kind of a micro world, right? Where we're dealing with personal decisions and personal interactions. And I believe that if in a very specialized situation where a person was given this choice, where they were in a very unique situation, in the right place, in the right time, and they had the right skills and the right experiences, and someone came to them and says, yes, all this North Korea stuff, whatever, right? But this person needs help. And you are in a very unique situation, not because you're someone like super special or that you're better than someone, just because of the life that you led and the experiences that you had, you have certain skills and skill sets that allow you to help this person. Will you help them? I believe, and like you can see that happening in the Chosun Institute when we went to these normal people and said, you are given this chance to make a difference in what you do on a daily basis, and you can change these people's lives. Normal people have time and time again, and it's not just like this North Korean issue, it's just we as an American society have become successful, yes, because of all the things, but because of the people here who care about our neighbors and care about each other, and that's what makes us strong, and that's what makes us unique. And I believe that, yes, what I did on a macro level seems either on one side crazy or on the other side amazing. But when you boil it down to the micro level, all I was doing was just trying to help these people get from one place to another and bring them from a bad place to a better place. Because I personally am the result of people who've made that same decision. And when my family left, my mom and my dad left Korea to start a brand new life with no idea what they had in front of them. And I am the result of that and all the amazing things that I've been able to experience. And, you know, that was because of their courageousness. And when you're encountering that and seeing someone that's willing to be courageous for their family, for not themselves, but for others, I believe that any one of us here at this table or any one of us that's listening, when they're presented that same exact situation that's custom tailored for specifically them, that they would say yes, because that's who we are as people. We want to help other people. And so again, I don't want to try to downplay what it is that I did, but that's not the world that I live in. I don't live in this world of like these geopolitical events. I'm just a guy that wants to live a normal life. And when I see someone that's struggling and I can help them, I want to help them, you know?
You've told us quite a tale today. It was a very beautiful story, very heartfelt and very personal, and I want to thank you for that. And what I've heard is that you're a guy who has been compelled since you were basically a kid by meaning and purpose, and that has led you into a very difficult and unusual place. And I am very moved by what you've done, even though it didn't go the way you had hoped, and all the other things that you've done to help these people. I'm actually even more moved by the fact that it doesn't seem to have this geopolitical dimension to it, that for you it's something much closer to home and simpler, that it's about these people. And I just have to say that I hope this goes your way, because this is an extraordinary thing that you're dealing with. It's very scary. And you've done something that seems to me very pure, and it's not ended up the way it should have.
I appreciate it, and thank you. I just want to also recognize that, like, I'm here talking to you, so obviously I'm kind of the guy that you guys are focusing on. But there are dozens of people that around the world that just as much wanted to see progress and just as much wanted to help and just as much were willing to put it on the line to be able to try to facilitate a better future. And I'm not the star of the show here. There are so many people who put on, like, again, I'm not a card carrying member of this place. Like, I support it, and if they ask me for help and if people want to associate with me with them, that's fine. But like, those are the people that put in the time, the effort to make these relations, that really put in the time to make these plans. And I'm just the guy they called up to help. And at the end of the day, that's who I am. So I appreciate the praise, but there are so much more people that deserve it far more than I do.
Thank you for checking out this entire episode on YouTube. If you want to follow up on this topic, check out our podcast feed or visit us on our website at jordanharbinger.com, where you can learn more about our guest and dive even deeper into what we discussed today. And remember, YouTube is not the only place that you can check out The Jordan Harbinger Show. Any podcast app should have us. Check out the links in the description where you will find access to our shows that don't appear on YouTube, like Skeptical Sunday, where we debunk topics like crystal healing, GMOs, conspiracy theories, homeopathy, tipping, even lawns, to find out if they're backed by science and logic, or if they're just complete nonsense. Spoiler, many of them are complete nonsense. Also, our Feedback Friday shows where we help people escape from cults, get raises at work, and take all manner of questions from you, the audience, all the way down to the bottom of the barrel. And every episode of The Jordan Harbinger Show has something useful you can take away and apply in your own life and help you navigate what I know can often seem like the overwhelming and paralyzing challenges of modern life. Life can be hard, yes, but we are here to help. And if you appreciate how we help, remember to like, comment, and subscribe.